Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Anime Night in the Dojo. Today's featured show, MF Ghost, Season 3.
Yep, MF Ghost, Season 3, Episode 3. Welcome back to the dojo. I'm Ryu. Sage, we're back for more Anime Night in the Dojo, and well, into the final lap. That's the name of this episode, and thanks to meta knowledge of what the next episode title is, you guys can't see it because the copyright blocker is up there, but it's titled Their First Kiss. Now, that could mean any myriad of things, because there's a lot of terms in racing that involve that. So somebody might just be getting spun out, and there aren't any romantic anything happening. So we'll just have to see. If anybody watched the Daytona 500 last weekend, well, there were a lot of things that would involve on-race kissing there, and a lot of cars crash. But that seems to be the standard affair with any super speedway racing, especially in NASCAR these days, where, you move out of line by a quarter of an inch and you tag some dude going 185, and then all of a sudden 17 of the 35 cars in the field are, scrap metal. So, that's just how it is. Yeah. As for what's going on with Kaneda, he's plot devising his way to victory until the other plot device of where he almost destroys his elbow. So I can't wait to see what they do with that. I really, not that I want him to be like supremely hurt or anything, but it's just like I'm gonna be a little disappointed if it's not like the big Ryosuke face reveal of like, I can't believe you did this. You should have never raced in this condition. What are you doing? Rolled up newspaper like we talked about. Because if it was just hand waved like, oh man, plot device happened, and all of a sudden his elbow is not damaged anymore, it's like, are we really gonna go supernatural with this? So either way, it'll be interesting to see what happens here. Obviously, we talked about this last season too, is like, I don't know if Kaneda ever has to win any one of these races. You know what I mean? I don't think he's winning this race. I don't think he's passing Sawatari or Beckenbauer. Those are the big dudes. He might catch up and like give the guy in the Ferrari a run for his money in the final lap, but passing Sawatari or Beckenbauer is a big ask. So it'll probably be something like what they did with what the author did with Takumi in at the end of Initial D. Though Takumi did win the vast majority of his races. So it's kind of it's an interesting contrast for that, but I think at the very most we'll see Kaneda win like one of these MFG races for the duration of the series, and it's a completely different thing compared to what Takumi did in Initial D, but two completely different situations. So one was street racing, this is organized and legal. So either way, we're going to push some buttons and get going here, see what's up with this, if we get the actual end of the race or what's going to be happening. But based on what we speculated, we'll probably have this episode and how they've done it the last two seasons of like the race ends like say halfway through next episode or like a third of the way through next episode, and then we get like the immediate aftermath, that kind of thing. That's how they usually like to do it, as opposed to just here's the end of the race, that's the end of the episode. They've never done that, which is perfectly fine. So anyway, let's push some buttons and get going here. So people on Patreon, we'll see you on the other side of the edit for the timer reaction, and people on YouTube and beyond, we'll see you for the discussion on YouTube. So if you're looking for the timer reaction or the other thing, YouTube, Patreon, the links are there. Watch whatever you need to, whatever you want to, that kind of thing. So here goes some. Well, there you guys have it. Another fantastic episode for what this is doing. It's always interesting when I hear them start talking about something, and I'm just like, all right, I'm going to have to explain this, aren't I? And then I don't have to explain it. This series has done that several times. There are a couple times where I've talked about something, and like right after the fact of it happening and like explaining like the car mechanics, whatever. But then even later in the episode, they go into detail about it, and not immediately. You know what I mean? I think there's only been one or two times where I was just like, I'm kind of surprised they didn't talk about it, based on like hindsight and looking back at the series going, I'm kind of surprised they didn't talk about that. But it was only like two things. in all the random car mechanic and racing just jargon that they've talked about and explained, there have only been like 2 or 3 times in this whole series where they've outright not explained it, and I had to explain it, even not like immediately. And now I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't even have to talk about it. I just have to see if it's factually correct. And obviously, this author knows his cars, not unlike, you know, the freaking Food Wars guy, giant foodie. Everything in that about cooking was 100% accurate, you know, that kind of thing. But it's definitely interesting to see just how well they're doing, just once again the announcing, that kind of thing. There was something that I was gonna mention that like didn't make sense in the middle, or like near the beginning of the episode, but I don't remember exactly what the announcer said that I was gonna question, like, hold on, wait, that doesn't make sense. But stuff like that doesn't really matter too much. But either way, another interesting sequence, you know what I mean? And the big thing going on right now is, yes, well, Kaneda is king of the peninsula, and, you know, he's made massive strides to get all the positions back that he lost. Simple fact of the matter is, and we talked about this in the previous 2 seasons, and when they were talking about like Aiba and how, you know, the veteran guy is now in his ear telling him to not burn his tires out, Kaneda has massively burned his tires, reclaiming all the positions that he lost. So, mention at the end of the reaction there that Beckenbauer and Sawatari's tires are probably the freshest out of all of them because they were setting the pace. And Sawatari really wasn't pushing Beckenbauer because, as we've talked about before, he's just kind of cruising. You know what I mean?
Yeah, both of them were just kind of cruising, and like Sawatari wasn't really making any attempts to actually pass Beckenbauer. He was just waiting for someone else to interfere, like in this case, Akiba.
Yeah.
So their tires are largely untouched. Meanwhile, yeah, Kanata has had to heavily burn his tires out to get all the way up here. And as soon as the peninsula section is over, he's at a disadvantage again. Combined with the fact that his tires are so heavily stripped. So he's probably dropping back down to 3rd, if not 4th.
Right. So it will be interesting to see what they do with that. I am glad that they're giving him, like, they needed a moment where Beckenbauer realizes that he exists. Like, legitimately, not just, oh, they're talking about that Kaneda guy again. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, now he's making a pass on me, actually, and actually overtook him. You know what I mean? Obviously, he's not really letting it faze him because he's, you know, smug German. But still, you're going to recognize someone more when they actually do something in front of your face, as opposed to just it being hearsay from like the announcers or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, like the whole next episode being First Kiss, I'm pretty damn sure it's gonna be freaking the driving related one, and it's gonna be freaking Beckenbauer and Kanata.
Right. That kind of thing.
Yeah, and like Kanata's going to make Beckenbauer actually have to kind of try for a second there to retake his position before, you know, Kanata drops down to either 3rd or 4th.
Right. So it will be interesting to see what they do with that. But once again, everything that they talked about in this episode, between when Kanata makes the pass on the veteran guy, the guy in the Carrera, forget his name,
Shiyama or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Just things as subtle as, you know, ground clearance are a big deal, because if you bottom out, you lose all kinds of momentum. So as a driver, you have to know that. And in street racing, that's a big deal, because once again, as I pointed out when they were going off about Keisuke's protege, Suna, or whatever his name is you guys are street racing. You're on a public road. This isn't like circuit racing. This isn't a track designed to specific, you know, specifications. You're not at, you know, Daytona Motor Speedway or something, or, you know, one of the major like just anything like the Nürburgring, anything, pick any famous track that is an actual track designed without any like imperfections. You know what I mean? To prevent like, oh, these are the kind of vehicles that are mostly going to be here, so we're not going to have this. You know, these are public roads, and we've been over this before. So knowing those kinds of things, the tricks that Takumi would teach, kind of in these kinds of situations, you know, like the guest announcer was pointing out that kind of thing. He even did the whole the gutter thing because of his lack of grip on his tires. You know what I mean? And that wasn't the reason why Takumi ever did it, because he never had to worry about his tire wear in the downhills, because it was just a one shot. You know what I mean? A couple miles at most. These are several, you know, dozen or if not over 100 kilometers of racing, so they have to worry about tire wear. Takumi never had to worry about tire wear because the downhill was at most like 2 or 3 miles. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there was only like 1 or 2 races that Takumi ever did in the series that actually were any sort of endurance race to them.
Yeah. And even then, you didn't really have to worry about tire wear. The whole thing about what Takumi did with using the gutters was to get more space and to use it to make it, you know, a quicker turn and to get more grip on the road. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it was nice to see Kaneda do those kinds of things. Just all the different very specialized things that you can do with a vehicle with more ground clearance, that kind of thing. Because, you know, even the original 8.6 that Takumi drove, it was never really designed to be a sports car, but it kind of just turned into that based on all the things that were shown off in Initial D. It still had more ground clearance than the majority of sports cars, like, you know, K-Skate's car, that kind of thing. So it's ground clearance is a thing. Everything they're covering is a big deal. You know, they went into like the whole like the drafting thing with Sawatari and Aiba, that kind of thing, or Akiba. You know, if you have the Ferrari pulling you in a draft, 2 cars are better than 1. It's that simple. It doesn't really matter what the vehicle is. If you have the push and pull from draft, you are going to overtake any vehicle. It would have to be a massive horsepower difference in the vehicles for a draft to not be able to overtake a singular vehicle in the case of Beckenbauer's Porsche. So everything that they talked about was spot on, and I don't really have to give it any notes. And it's still keeping all the like you know, mystique and intrigue that Initial D had with all the street racing stuff. And, you know, now that Kaneda has his resolve and he doesn't have the flaw in his driving anymore, now he's able to notice certain things. Like it was kind of like a random, just like one-off really quick line where he was just like, oh, I'm understeering. That means his tires are gone. You know what I mean? It's that simple. So he's able to immediately notice it, as opposed to pushing past it and noticing it after it's a problem, like he like what happened to him in the first couple races when he still hadn't broken past that mental barrier of, you know, his resolve not being there because of his death, that kind of thing. So
yeah, once again, he has not been like seriously racing since his mother's death, which was like over a year prior to this. This is like the first example we've got of him like actually like racing at racing full force.
Yep. And sometimes it just comes down to your equipment. In this case, the tires. You know what I mean? There's only so much you can force, and you know they did a good job talking about that, like where Sawatari passes you know, Akiba in the downhill because his car's lighter, that kind of thing. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it because it's just the equipment that you have. Just like they were pointing out, you know, like I mentioned during the reaction there, I assumed Sawatari was going to wait, but as Age mentioned, if he waits too long, Akiba would just drive away from them in the non-peninsula part, like the last like third of the course, because that's like the more pseudo high speed section, and they probably wouldn't be able to catch up to him in time to pass him in the like more technical aspects that are in the last little bit of the course before the finish line. So
yeah, the peninsula is their only real chance to pass Akiba if he's the one setting the pace.
Yep.
Like, keeping him behind them is a totally different story. But if he's out front, there's not much they can really do to get around him if it's basically just a full-on speed section.
Yep. So, either way, it was another solid episode. It's interesting that they had him complaining about the whole risking a violation, and once again, we haven't got all the rules on that, but in all reality we have, because in the first episode they listed all the major rules of MFG, and none of these things would be what you would consider a violation in actual circuit racing. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, from what we know, bumping is fine so long as it is just little bumps like they did here, where it's not actually pit maneuvering the other car or causing them to crash or anything like that. That'll get you disqualified from what we know. But minor bumps like that, he's more just upset that they would go that far to bump him and potentially risk him spinning out and getting them disqualified.
Right. But at the end of the day, that's kind of what you have to do. And if you're we did see an example of that when on the Mount Fuji mountain course with the ash section, where the dude in the white Lambo spun himself out in using the other vehicle, and they're like, oh, that's not going to be a violation because he's the one that caused himself to spin out by hitting the other vehicle. You know what I mean? So there are situations like that where, in this case, the risks that are taken by drivers like Kaneda and Sawatari in the cases that we saw here is, yes, it's a risk, but you also have to remember that you're in the godly 15. If a bump like that causes an incredibly talented driver like Akiba to spin out, they don't belong there. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. A tiny bump like that is not going to make an elite driver lose control of their vehicle, unless it's a massive external force like the ash and stuff like that happening. You know what I mean? So that's why they're willing to take the risks, because they know the quality of the drivers that they're passing, so that they can do those kinds of things without fear of the violation happening. Because if, say, Akiba loses control of his car here, then he shouldn't be in MFG, period. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you see it a lot in just in very high-end competitive anything. It's just a thing of you're willing to take risks because you know the other person is professional and knows what they're doing, and that the chances are that you trust that they will react appropriately and keep something from escalating. So you're willing to actually take risks that you normally wouldn't be willing to take in a more rookie setting.
Right. And it kind of all boils down to something like this, where just oh, well, if Kaneda was racing an amateur driver here, would he risk it? It's no, he wouldn't have to do that, because he would just pass them like they're not there. He would never be in this situation against an amateur driver. You know what I mean? So it's not even a discussion that's worth having, because the odds of him ever being in this situation and doing that to an amateur driver are literally none, because against a massively inferior opponent, it would just be no different than what they passed that veteran guy in the Porsche. You know what I mean? They would go around him like he's not there. So it wouldn't even be something that would be happening. So, yeah, and if the amateur driver did end up, trading paint with them, it would be their fault, because they would be probably the ones initiating the contact, like with the Lambo on the ash part of that previous course, and they would be at fault for the crash or whatever. So it's always one of those things where you have to take it into account of well, that would never happen in that case. So a lot of interesting things. We got more MFG lore from the announcer, and what they did with the Mount Fuji eruption stuff, them like paying homage to like turning off the lights in the tunnel and stuff like that, not just to make it harder, but it's like more of like a symbolic gesture, that kind of thing. Totally Ryosuke. You know what I mean? That's got Ryosuke written all over it. All over it, obviously. So
yeah, it's once again like they brought up the whole thing of this is not just it's not just about making the track more difficult, or even necessarily just the symbolism, but a big part of MFG apparently is a charity case.
Yep.
They don't really need the money. Ryosuke's funding the whole thing.
Yeah, he's just kind of doing what the Ashes of Creation guy was doing until all of that came tumbling down. I don't know if any of you guys were paying attention to any of that madness, but this is exactly why if you start your own project, I'm just going to talk about this for a second, but in the case of Ashes of Creation, that the guy like that started it, who had like a passion for MMOs and wanted to do all that, he should have never gotten a board. And by board, I mean like a board of like, you know, executives and stuff like that that were running the project. He should have stayed at the top and everything that he said goes. Kind of like Vince McMahon back in the 90s with WWE. You know what I mean? It's his product, his game. He should have never sold out to a board or anything like that. It should have been what he said goes, and then they probably wouldn't have been in this situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, just look at Project Gorgon for that matter. Like everyone's been talking Ashes of Creation, Ashes of Creation, Ashes of Creation all throughout the development. And then the Ashes of Creation dev sells out and Ashes of Creation dies, and now everyone's moved over to Project Gorgon instead because those creators didn't sell out. They just kept the game the way they wanted to make the game.
Yep.
And made it to launch, and now it's totally just taken over that whole like hardcore MMO fan base.
Yep. No different than like Larian Studios not selling out the Divinity guys, but to be fair, they're based in the Netherlands and they'll never be bought out because I don't think anything in the Western Europe sphere of labor laws and stuff like that is ever going to allow buyouts like that, like you have in America, where, you know, if you're like, say, Coca-Cola and you see some random company coming up with a soda to rival you, they just buy you out. That's the law of America. You see competition coming up, you buy out the competition before they can be a threat, and if they don't take the buyout, you bury them in litigation until they're bankrupt. That's the system. So they're forced to take the buyout or they go bankrupt. That's the way the system works in America, and it's quite unfortunate for obvious reasons, but we're not going into that right now. But I appreciate that kind of lore, that kind of thing. That's really cool. It's nice to see like the fans, like, you know, appreciating that kind of thing, those kinds of shots. I still don't know what they're doing with that freaking angel. I need to go read the source material and just see if that came out of nowhere or if this is like anime original and they're just screwing around. It's so freaking random.
Yeah, once again, she was there to begin with in the previous seasons, but she wasn't nearly that fat, and they didn't put near as much of an emphasis on it. They just kind of mentioned that, yeah, she was a little more chubby than the rest of them.
Yeah, and once again, she's not fat. She's probably like 10 more pounds than everybody else there. Still probably 95 pounds dripping wet. You know what I mean? So
she's probably got a bit more weight on her than everyone else based on like her current appearance. Not the previous appearance. Yeah, that was probably like 5 or 10 pounds. Her current appearance, she's probably at least like 20, 25 pounds more than the rest of them. But yeah, like no, there was the comment of her being a bit more chubby than the rest of them, but that was just kind of an offhand thing, and she didn't really look that much different.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, just inexplicably, episode 1 of this season, literally like 5 minutes after episode 2 of last season, final episode of last season, she's just inexplicably gained like 20 pounds.
Maybe it was because she got hit with that ham, and it just, you know, we saw it in the intro. She gets hit by that, you know, that ham, and that's it. It's still really weird. I don't know what's up with that, but you know,
she inexplicably gains 20 pounds in a massive freaking rivalry with the announcer guy.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just it's really weird, but Either way, key points for next time. It'll probably be the Kaneda Beckenbauer thing for the first kiss thing. That's what was going to be in the racing terms of that. And then, speaking of random girl shenanigans, Sawatari, man, just wow. That's like Eric Cartman levels of mental gymnastics to make it sound like you're not the perv. My kind of perviness is better than his, which again, I don't remember him womanizing at all. Like I mentioned during the freaking reaction, it's like was Akiba going around like we see in the intro that he like sees one of the angels walk by or a woman walk by and he like blushes and does like, oh man, she's hot thing. But okay, that's the first time we've seen that.
Yeah, we've never seen him being any sort of womanizer or anything like that. The only thing we've seen is just that we know he's like the popular one and has all the fangirls and stuff like that.
Right. And it's that kind of like mental gymnastics of justification. It's like if you have to justify what you're doing, you're probably already in some kind of wrong lane. You know what I mean? I mean, what Sawatari does is, in case anybody forgot, his 17 complex is he only dates girls who are 17, and the second that they turn 18, he dumps them.
Yeah.
That's it. It's over.
Which, once again, is still technically legal in Japan.
Yeah.
Though, once again, this is supposed to be like 40 years in the future, and Japan's already kind of moving more into age of consent being 18, so chances are in actual 40 years in the future, it won't be legal anymore.
Right.
But by current precedent, it is still technically legal to date someone who's 17.
Yeah. But still, it's still...
It's socially frowned upon, but it's legal.
Right. So either way, I'm sure there'll still be that stuff that we talked about last season with, eventually he's going to like set his eyes on Ren and, madness is going to ensue off the track, that kind of. So. Yeah,
I mean, they wouldn't call specific attention to the fact that Ren is 17 if it wasn't for the fact that, and then already building up like the rivalry between freaking Sawatari and Kanata, if there wasn't going to be some form of romantic shenanigans later on.
And then we have to kill Shun, just off screen somewhere because he's going to lose his mind when, Ren reveals that she is number 7. So,
Which should be this season.
Yeah, it should be this season. So I am expecting massive hilarity, which is always great. But either way, everything was good. Once again, I am in that boat of like, I can't even talk about half this crap anymore. Now I just have to kind of like react to it and not have to correct anything. It's really freaking weird.
Yeah, I was gonna mention, when you were talking about that earlier, that like there's some niche topics about the cars and stuff like that we can kind of talk about here and there, but they largely cover most of it just in the show. Yeah,
at this point I'm just kind of like waiting because like I kind of like want to jump the gun and immediately start talking about it, and then literally the next sentence, they're talking about it. I'm just like, all right, that's cool. So, I just appreciate the competence. That's how it should be. There's probably a reasonable amount of people that maybe don't know anything about vehicles, and it's interesting information for them. Yeah, some people might not care. Absolutely, it's totally fine. You don't have to care about it at all. But for the people that know about this or might want to learn about it, I think it's important for the information to be accurate and not, just technobabble that they pull out of nowhere and doesn't make sense. And then like people hear it here or something and think it's like, how it is. It's like, you heard that on that racing show that just uses technobabble and not actual realistic stuff, right?
Yeah, they don't just hand wave technology like in freaking Sakamoto or like SAO or stuff like that.
Yeah. So, you know what they could hand wave? Crunchyroll player. That's what they could. But yeah. Did you guys know that there's sexualized imagery in a show that has, hit girls, flag girls, MFG angels, that kind of thing?
I mean, the angels are like, they're freaking like hybridization between like American Pit Girls and freaking Japanese idols.
Yep. Because of all the extra stuff that they do with them. Because, you know, here in America, like if you go to like Monster Energy Supercross, that kind of thing. I don't know if it's still Monster Energy Supercross. When I went to it like a decade ago, it was still Monster Energy Supercross for dirt bikes. But, you know, they had like the Flag Girls and Pit Girls and stuff like that. And they'd be wearing all like the Monster attire and stuff like that. But they were just kind of there. You know what I mean? They weren't being interviewed. They weren't being talked to. They would just like go out on the track, hold up the like signage or whatever, and then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, Pit Girls are more or less like the equivalent of like cheerleaders. Like they're there to be kind of fan servicey, but they don't really get any sort of major attention outside of their freaking couple of minutes in the spotlight.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Angels in this, yeah, get the full on freaking like Japanese idol treatment.
Right. So it's definitely an interesting mix for that kind of thing. But either way, another solid episode. Looking forward to definitely wrapping up the race next time, because they are like more than halfway through the final lap at this point.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like the standard, what they've been doing. You know, the race ends, then there's the immediate what happens after the race, and then we'll probably go back into the, you know, looking for Kanada's dad, that kind of thing, off-track nonsense. So anyway, that's all I got for this one. You got anything else, Age?
Not really.
Alrighty then. Well then, ladies and gentlemen, people of YouTube, beyond how you're watching, as always, we appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with us in the dojo for more Anime Night in the Dojo. And this was MF Ghost, Season 3, Episode 3. So, have a good morning, evening, afternoon. Whatever it is for you. Have a good one. See you next time.
Hey everyone, Victoria here. If you enjoyed the video, please consider pushing those like and subscribe buttons. Your support is greatly appreciated. Thanks again for your time, and we hope to see you again in the future.